Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this brief professional development session. Today, we'll be focusing on a topic from CICFP called Meal Pattern Minutes, Meal Times. This topic addresses a common question in childcare meal services. Are there specific rules about the meal times? About the times when meals and snacks must be served under CICFP. So I chose this particular meal pattern minute because many of us know what to serve, but we don't know when or how often meals and snacks must be served. So being clear on meal times helps ensure we remain compliant and also support children's nutritional needs appropriately. By the end of today's session, you'll feel confident explaining the mealtime regulations and will be better able to apply them in your daycare or any childcare setting. So we'll begin by looking at the question posed in the meal pattern minute. Are there any restrictions on when meals and snacks must be served in CACFP? The answer is no. Under federal regulation for CACFP, there are no specific times mandated for when meals or snacks must be served. However, and this is important, state agencies may impose additional rules on time intervals between meals or minimum durations for meal service. So you might have to check with your state agency or your sponsoring organization. I know for me as a daycare provider, through Kansas, it's not really regulated. They just kind of want to let you follow CFP's rules with what to serve, how to serve, when to serve, all that. So another key point, when we're serving infants, the mealtime rule is a little bit different. Because infants may be hungry outside of typical meal times, the guidance recommends feeding infants on demand, so when they show signs of hunger. And you should not disallow a reimbursable meal solely because it falls outside your usual timing window. So let's take a look on what this might look like in an actual daycare setting. So you might choose a typical meal or snack time. Some examples are like breakfast at 8 a.m., morning snack at 10:30, lunch, noon, afternoon snack 2:30. And that schedule is fine. I know for my CACFP, I go through Quality Care Incorporated out of El Dorado. I am only reimbursed 2 meals and 1 snack. So I do breakfast, lunch, and then the afternoon snack. But you are not required by federal CACFP to serve meals exactly at those times. You can kind of pick and choose what times you want to serve, but it's also a good thing to keep in mind of like, okay, we had breakfast at this time. Children might get a little pickish or a little bit hungry this time in the morning, so let's do morning snack. This time, lunch. It's a good idea to follow along to what children's schedules are. Routines are huge. Um, but you are not required by federal CACFP to serve meals exactly at those times. You just need to ensure the children are offered the required components of the meal pattern. And if your state doesn't set limits on spacing, you kind of have some flexibility. Like I said, Kansas, you got the flexibility. Still, if you move out of state, you may want to figure out what the state and local rules are. Like let's say perhaps Alabama says you can't serve lunch earlier than a certain hours after breakfast or requires a minimum gap before you do a snack. And then another, what this might look like in practice for infants, if baby A shows hunger cues at 9:15 outside your planned morning snack window, like at 10:30, you should respond and count that meal and snack as reimbursable rather than rigidly sticking to your schedule. So we kind of understand in practice. So why is this all important? Because if you inadvertently violate time space and rules, either state rules or your own internal policy, like you work at a childcare facility, like a childcare center, you risk non-compliance, loss of reimbursement, or even nutrition gaps for the children. Plus, flexibility while remaining compliant helps you support children's needs, especially infants and younger children who don't really are just getting into the routines, and helps your program run smoothly. So let's walk through a few what if scenarios. So what if you serve breakfast at 7 a.m., then lunch at 10:30, just 3.5 hours later? Is that a problem? Possibly, yes, if your state mandates a minimum gap between meals. Even if your state does not, you'll want to ensure the meal pattern. Requirements are still met and that you aren't doubling up meals in a way that counts as the same meal. So what if a child arrives late at 10:45 and you serve them in the morning snack, even though your planned snack is 2:30 p.m.? For older children, this may be acceptable if state allows, but for infants, you should probably absolutely serve when hungry. So I know through quality care, I have a time frame of when breakfast is instead of saying, 8 a.m. 8 a.m. is when we eat breakfast. I have changed it to where 8:15 to 8:30 or 8 a.m. to 8:30 we have breakfast. So if a child comes in during that time and I serve them breakfast, it's still credible. Um, and of course, with infants, always feed on demand. They're little, they don't understand. So what if you plan to serve snack at 2:30, but you find your afternoon children are very active and come back and ask for food at 1:45? It's generally okay to provide the snack based on children's need, however, document it appropriately and ensure you're still meeting your snack component requirements and not inadvertently disrupting your meal schedule slash unintended duplication. So I know quality care is a bit more strict on that, where it's just like, okay, if the meal is over, if you like, okay, we eat at 8 a.m. and a child comes in at 8:02, they're like, no, you can't. They weren't here for breakfast. They're a little bit more strict on that, but that is not the only CACFB reimbursement program that is out there for daycare providers. Quality care covers centers and in-home daycare providers. So, but there are others out there that I'm sure are different. I'm just giving you examples from my own experience with quality care. So if generally it's okay to provide the snack, document it, ensure you're still meeting your snack component requirements, not inadvertently disrupting your meal schedule and unintended duplications. So a couple of tips for staying compliant in general, not specifically with quality care because there's a whole bunch out there. Check your state agency. Like if you move out of state, check your state licensing. They may have some rules. The sponsoring organization for any state-specific mealtime rules include meal timing guidance in your daycare handbook. So if you have staff, they will know so all staff will know when meal and snacks are scheduled and what flexibility is allowed. I wouldn't necessarily put that in the parent. I would put in the parent handbook when meal times are. And I would also put it in the staff handbook. I do feel like there should be staff handbooks. I know I've had one staff member and a staff handbook helped greatly. Another tip for infants on-demand feeding, document any deviation from standard meal times and snack times, so like late arrivals, so you can justify why you served when you did. Quality care does do that. So if you have a child who comes in at a time where they're not usually in, you kind of fill out the reason why they're there. And then the parent just signs. But that child also has to be signed up for the program. It signed up, I use that loosely. Um, Another tip, review your daily schedule. Ensure you have adequate spacing between meals and snacks and that the meal pattern components are being served properly so you don't accidentally count one service as two or miss one altogether. So at this point, I would say let's end with our short group exercise. I'm handing out scenario cards in pairs. Review the scenario, decide is this compliant, why or why not, then we'll share back. Um, which I did not add that. But it's pretty easy to make those. And then, of course, they would facilitate the exercise. And then we gather all back together. And so in summary, while there are no universal mealtime mandates at the federal level for older children in CACFP, you must remain aware of your state's rules and maintain thoughtful scheduling, especially for infants, feeding children when they're hungry, documenting deviations, and ensuring you meet all components will help your program stay compliant and support children's well-being. And then afterwards, for the additional information, I would want to like print it out on a sheet and then like hand it out and be like, this is some additional information that you may need for future reference. But some additional information that would be helpful for you guys about this topic. Make sure to stay updated. Use the handbook and training materials that CACFP provides. Add this stuff to the staff training handbook and orientation. Meal times aren't just about compliance. If you serve infants, make sure your policy reflects feed on demand practices where appropriate, and this may require more flexibility in timing, like 8 to 8:30 instead of being like, no, we eat at 8. Consider linking mealtime scheduling with your curriculum policy. So, like, I know right now for the daycare, CACFP or Quality Care has, I signed up for a grant through Quality Care where we do the bread grant where the children and I all make different types of grain products. And so it helps to get the children understand healthy eating patterns, where our food comes from, but it does help with, I forgot, lost my train of thought. Something popped up. Whatever. Document and monitor, keep logs of meal times, all of that. And then, of course, communicate with parents. That's a huge one. No matter if it's sick policies, what happened with their child, meals, diapers, all the time, communicate with parents. And that is basically all that I have. So thank you for coming.